Okay, welcome to Record Collectors Club Conversations podcast. So this week I kick off my Funk and Soul series, and I welcome onto the podcast record collector John Downing. So John's collected records for many years, but primary focus is on funk, soul, and reggae. But his collection spans across loads of other genres too. So I first came across John and his collection via the vinyl community on YouTube, where he's a very popular member on the community and the platform. He puts out some great videos, shows off his finds, digs into his singles, all that kind of stuff. So, welcome to the podcast, John.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks very much.
No problem at all. So, we'll just dive straight in. Tell me about your history with records and sort of when did you start collecting?
Yeah, so I think same as a lot of people my age, I first got into music through Top of the Pops. So I'm nearly 50 now. So in the early 80s, Top of the Pops was the thing to watch over Thursday night. I've got an older sister. She's 9 years older than me, and she started collecting. She started buying records in the late 70s. So me as a kid, I just wanted part of that really. So people started buying me records in the early 80s. So my first real love was Adamant,
Okay.
and so seeing Adamant on Top of the Pops in 1980 doing amp music was very similar to a lot of people sort of cite Bowie doing Starman on Top of the Pops with has been that sort of life-changing moment. Well, the thing that set me off on this course was Adamant. So yeah.
Excellent. And then obviously I like to say I watch your YouTube videos. You can kind of see in the background on a lot of your videos, your collection. How big's the collection these days?
So it's about 7,000 records at the moment, I think. So probably about 4,500 LPs, the rest of it 45s and 12s.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've been collecting, I say, since I was a kid. Ever since I can remember, I've been collecting. But over recent years, I have been thinning it out. So I think it helps have a bit of a purge now and again. So and it helps finance the purchase of more records. So
It
yeah,
does. I
but
mean,
it's got
obviously,
7,000 at the minute.
and the space thing is obviously an issue, isn't it, for us record collectors?
Well, it is. There's just records everywhere, as you know.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, isn't it? It's so yeah, space is an issue. Obviously, funds. The price of vinyl nowadays, the price of records. It's not a cheap hobby necessarily. So if it can be partially self-funding, that certainly helps.
Yeah. And then you buy secondhand records mainly, but you also buy some new stuff, don't you, as well?
Yeah, I do buy new stuff, but I think part of the fun of being a record collector is going out and looking for records. Speaking to people that love music,
Yeah.
going to gigs, going to record shops, anywhere that you can find records. Basically, it's the hunt. That's half of it. The music is only part of the attraction. The rest of it is actual physical thing of looking for records. And yeah, I've always loved it. Some of the happiest times have been in record shops talking to people about music, and that's still the case now. So if I can get to a record shop, I will do. I don't buy much online at all at the moment. I don't know about yourself. I mean, do you tend to get out into shops, or do you buy much online?
Yeah, it's all shops really. I do buy little bits online, but only if it's a record that I can't seem to get in a local shop that they might not have got it in, and I'm really after it. Otherwise, I'll tend to just wait and wait it out a little bit. That's with new releases. Secondhand stuff, I don't buy on Discogs that much. I eBay now and again, but yeah, I've really got into digging in record shops. And when I try to do as much traveling as I can, which I know you do, and when you go away, I'm sure
Yeah,
you like me, the first thing you look at is
yeah.
record shop list. Where am I going to go? How much time have I got?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? So, I mean, first with Discogs or eBay, it's so easy to buy records. I mean, if you've got, an unlimited budget, you can buy pretty much anything. But the fun of it is finding it yourself
Hmm.
and finding it at the right price as well. That's the a big part of the attraction of record collecting. So sometimes you can be waiting years to find a record. So they're finding it in a record shop wherever you may be.
Hmm.
That just adds to the thrill of it all,
Does.
So. But yeah, like yourself, if anywhere I'm from going anywhere, I'm traveling anywhere, certainly abroad, I'll always have a look at, what record shops are in the area, and it's a great way of finding what's going on in the city as well.
Yeah.
So if you are, if you're going to a new city, speaking to people in record shops is a great place to start.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I think a lot of people always say that like these like local shops, like record shops, are like the beat of the city, they're the heart of the city kind of thing, and that's
That's
where
it.
you do find that information out.
Yeah.
So obviously I mentioned in introduction, you're big into funk and soul and reggae. How did you kind of fall into those genres?
Well, it's I think like yourself, I'm a big Paul Weller fan.
Mhm.
So so back as well as a teenager, um, probably in the early 90s, I think around the time his first solo album came out, so that's sort of 91, 92.
Yeah, yeah.
I was going around local shops trying to get all of the Jam and Style Council singles for the B-sides. And this was before the Extras album came out, so you couldn't get the singles on an LP. You had to, search out the singles. And when I picked up the Beat Surrender double pack, the 7-inch
Huh.
double pack, the second disc is a Soul Covers
Okay.
EP. So you have the Jams version of War by Edwin Starr, the Shy Lights with Stoned Out of My Mind, but most importantly, they did a version of Curtis Mayfield's Move On Up,
Mhm.
which I absolutely fell in love with, and that led me to seeking out a best of Curtis Mayfield, and that was it from there on in. So the last 30 something years has been I've been buying soul music pretty
Mm.
much because of that moment.
Okay. So that was, I was going to say the next question was going to be something like, what was the first funk and soul record that you picked up? Would you class that as a funk and soul record, or would you
Yeah,
say,
absolutely. I mean, that's one of my, certainly the first Curtis album, his first solo record, Curtis, is one of my favorite
yeah,
records.
yeah,
And I mean, you just can't go wrong with his stuff. The guy was a genius. But that was pretty much where I started. But this was pre-internet. This was like 91, 92. So you couldn't just get online and get a list of the best soul records ever made or whatever. It was just a case of getting out into record shops and trying to find shops with a soul section
yeah.
and I suppose hit and miss, see what you can find, and hopefully you find a good one, and off you
Mm.
go. And in many cases, it was a case of starting off with the big artists like Stevie Wonder, Otis Redding, Marvin Gaye. But there's a reason why they are the big artists because they made so many great records.
Mhm. Mhm.
So anybody getting into soul music, that run of LPs that Stevie Wonder made in the early '70s, those 5 records, it's a pretty much
Yeah,
perfect run of
yeah,
albums. Any match any artist catalog. Is
yeah.
absolutely perfect. So, if you are getting into soul music, that's a perfect place to start, and that's pretty much where I started myself. Back in the early '90s, and so I just kept going from there. Same with the likes of Marvin Gaye. I mean, whenever you read about soul music in any of the monthly magazines, they'll always cite the likes of What's Going On as being one of the great soul records, which it is. But he made so many great soul records in the '70s. Well, obviously the '60s as well, but in the 1970s he made some brilliant albums. So stuff like Here Medea and I Want You, records that you'll find relatively easily because they sold, a number of copies and they're not too expensive. Um, and they're great places to start because they're
Mm.
brilliant records.
Yeah. So then, like the soul scene currently, then what do you think of that? I mean, I'm talking like artists like Leon Bridges, Curtis Harding. Are you buying their records as well?
Yeah, I mean, I say this quite a lot in my videos that I'm not necessarily a fan of modern soul artists who are just copying a '60s sound or a '70s sound. I need them to be doing something else with it. Otherwise, there's no point. If they're
Mhm.
just copying, just trying to get that retro sound, they're not really adding anything. I think Curtis Harding is a great example of somebody that is doing something new. I haven't necessarily warmed to Leon Bridges, I must admit. I mean, I like his stuff, but I haven't really gone out my way to check it out too much. But Curtis Harding's excellent. I mean, I love some of the stuff on the Daptone label, particularly Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings.
Yeah.
More so as a live act. Obviously, Sharon Jones passed away a few years ago now, but they were incredible live. She was like a female James Brown. She's a total force of nature,
Mm.
and I think sometimes those sort of bands that they suit a live setting more so than on record. I say they're an incredible live band, but yeah, I say it's a bit hit and miss with some of the new soul stuff, but no, there's some cool stuff out there.
Yeah. And then obviously, I think when I've just started collecting soul music, 'cause I've only really been collecting it quite recently, I'd say since in the last maybe 2 or 3 years since I put the second book out. I had a couple of big collectors in there, big soul collectors, and I was kind of like looking at what they were collecting. But I always knew from growing up anyway, soul labels like Motown, because my parents had Motown records,
Yeah.
Atlantic Records, obviously because of Aretha Franklin, maybe. and Stax Records. They're obviously the big prevalent kind of like labels.
Yeah.
There's other stuff out there though, isn't there? Could you recommend some other labels to kind of like look at?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I say, I'm a big Curtis Mayfield fan. So anything on the Curtain label.
Yeah.
So that was his label from about 68 through to the late 70s, 79, 80,
Hmm.
it folded. So that sort of 12-year period, particularly the first half of that up to the mid 70s, I don't think the label put a foot wrong. You know, artists, so obviously Curtis Mayfield records, but also the Impressions, their records were put on that label both before and after he left the group. Maybe Staples and the Staple Singers, they recorded for Curtin. The Natural Four, so anything from that sort of period, those records are fantastic and definitely worth picking up.
Mhm.
As you get towards the end of the 70s, of course, disco had kicked in, and Curtis, he didn't, he made some good records around that sort of period, but he didn't necessarily suit disco. There are some good disco records on the label towards the end of the run by Linda Clifford, but certainly if you're looking at soul and funk music, 68 through to the mid 70s on Curtin, you can't go wrong.
And then obviously reggae, Trojan was the big label for reggae. What about anything else?
Yeah, so well, this is quite interesting because one label that I do collect is a local Birmingham label, which
Hmm.
was, it was around just in the mid '70s, just for 2 or 3 years. It's a label called Black Wax.
Okay.
So this was a label which was based out of a Birmingham record shop on the Lascelles Road in Handsworth, and they would license music from Jamaica and put it out in the UK. It's got a beautiful label design, a black and gold label design. It's very distinctive, as is the case with many of the reggae
Yeah.
labels. And that's part of the attraction. Once again, a collected record. So it's a cliche. You don't get that with a CD. But that's part of the attraction. But the Black Wax label is beautiful. And they put out a mixture of stuff. It's only sort of 30 or 40 records. But being here in Birmingham, as it's a Birmingham label, I do tend to find these records quite regularly. Some of them are more rare than others. And I just think that's an example of a small local label doing a really good job in that sort of period.
Okay, cool. And then just going back into soul then, did you ever dip into the Northern Soul scene in the UK, or were you sort of like a little bit too young for that?
Yeah, but well, I mean, obviously, I'm sort of 50 now, so I have been to, back in the day, been to sort of Northern Soul Nighters and stuff like
Mm.
that. But it's never really been my thing, if I'm totally honest. Um, I've always preferred funk,
Hmm.
so I've always sort of leaned more in that direction. And also with the Northern Soul thing, it is that formulaic sound. So if you're there for, if you're there for a night, it's very much that floor to the floor thing, throughout that period, and it's I like a bit more variation. So some great music in there, but I've never really been part of that scene. No.
Okay. So if we just go back into talking about digging for records, then obviously we talked about independent record shops. Birmingham, that area. I've been recently. When did I was in Birmingham in June last year. Again, I went to see Springsteen, but obviously there's some great record shops in the Midlands. Recently, you went to Vinyl Shakedown Records, which was one of the early
Yeah,
podcast
and
episodes.
that's why I went there. I heard
Oh, was
the
it?
podcast. Yeah, I heard the podcast,
Yeah,
and been following him on Instagram for a little while, and it just so happened that I heard the podcast, and I think he posted a video of the shop, and I could see a record on the wall that I wanted. It's a sort of disco album, sort of a library disco album by
yeah,
Brian Bennett. And I could see it on the wall. I thought, well, I had some time to myself, so I'll travel down to the shop, and it's great, a great shop, and that's it. It's went there. It is very different to some of the shops around here. So I found a
mm,
few interesting things. Chatted to the guy. Sorry, I can't remember his name, but
yeah,
chatted
Grant.
to the guy there. It was a good way to spend an hour. So that's the fun of going to record shops.
That's it. And then so like local to you, then where do you normally dig for records?
Yeah, so there's some good shops in Birmingham, not necessarily in the centre of Birmingham, in the town centre. So in Sutton Coldfield, you have Psychotron, which is a really good shop, good high turnover of stock there. So that's what you want as a record collector, is you don't be looking at the same stuff again and again.
Yeah.
And more locally to me here, there are two shops, Polar Bear in King's Heath and Music is the Answer in Yardley Wood.
Okay.
Both good shops. Both the owners of both shops are great. Very kindly they get in touch if they get anything interested in sort of soul or reggae or funk. They will get in touch so I can, I suppose have first dibs, I suppose. But
Mhm.
um, but yeah, good shops and that's again high turnover of stock, and that's what you want.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you just mentioned there that you get first dibs, but then I feel like if you've shopped in a record shop for 10 years, loyalty's repaid, isn't it, by that opportunity coming to you, really?
It is, yeah, and I think it helped. If you live in an area where there's record shops, then just tell the owners what it is you're looking for. It's that they want to sell records. That's why they're there. But yeah, it's been very good actually. So I get on with the guys really well, and say if something, not anything, but if something interesting comes in, they will get in touch, and it's worked out well in the past.
Excellent. And then obviously we mentioned trips abroad that you've done. Could you sort of where would be the best city that you think you've ever dug for records? And I'm not just saying
Well,
like
that's
with finds, I'm talking like quality as
Yeah.
well.
Well, I mean, if you're looking for records, go to Japan, go
Yeah.
to Tokyo or even, Kyoto. Um, yeah, just too many record shops, and that's so I did travel
Right.
to Japan about 10 years ago. I was there with my wife, so I wasn't specifically looking for records, but I was there for 2 weeks. I could pretty much just spend every day just looking for records. The record shops everywhere. That's what you dream of, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think if I ever went again, hopefully one day I get to go again. It'll be I'll perhaps plan it out a little bit better and be a bit more effective with my digging, spending my time. But yeah, I mean, just incredible, absolutely incredible. And it's clear that some of the big stores there, the likes of Disc Union,
yeah.
they must scour the world looking for records, getting things at the right price, and their stock is absolutely incredible,
Mhm.
absolutely incredible.
Have you ever been to the big record fair in Utrecht at Den Bosch? Because that was just this weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah, just this weekend. So I'm actually going. I'm going in April next year.
Oh, brilliant.
So I've just sorted out my travel and digs and stuff. So I've never been before, but I'm going next year. So I'd be interested to see what it's like.
Do you not think you're going to be overwhelmed when you get there though? Because there's so many records and so many sellers. I don't know. I don't know if I'm. Sometimes when I go into a shop, I'm like, where do I start, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's split. Is it split over 2 or 3 days? So you've got a bit of time, haven't you?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that will be the case. But um, yeah, I mean, I think it's quite interesting actually. I was looking at the map of it. It's split into particular genres in different areas.
Okay.
So all
Right.
the soul sellers are together, metal sellers and such like. So that will help a little bit. But I'm pretty sure we'll be overwhelmed. But yeah, I mean, it'll be a great experience. Obviously, I know people that go every time it's on, but I never had a chance to do it before, so I'll be doing it next year. But yeah, hopefully, the idea, of course, is to try and find stuff that I won't find here in the UK. So hopefully there'll be opportunity to do that.
Okay, so that leads us nicely onto then want list stuff. Is there any like big records that you've been chasing forever and you haven't found yet that you might find
Yeah,
there?
well, I mean, not necessarily massive records. Well, I'm a big Prince fan,
Hmm.
so I've always wanted an original copy of the Rainbow Children. He put out this album in 2001. It's quite a limited vinyl run. I saw him on that tour. He played in London. He did 3 nights at the Apollo
Yeah.
in London. He was absolutely incredible. That was the time when he had his best bands, So I know people talk about the Revolution or the MPG. He had an absolutely fantastic band with him at that point in the early 2000s. So and so that's brilliant live artist, brilliant songwriter. But that album, it's an interesting record. It's slightly quirky. It's different to anything else that he put out. It's quite jazzy. So I'd certainly like an original copy of that. It's one thing I've been looking for. But this year I've ticked off a few things. Um, in the early part of the year, I picked up an album by a band called Odyssey. They only made one album for Mo West in the early 70s. It's an album that's getting more difficult to find, and I found a nice copy of that. And at the same time, a copy of the Sweet Charles album for Sweet People, which was a James Brown production. That's something I've been looking for a nice copy of for a few years, and that was actually sitting next to it in the bins in a record shop that I went into. So this is one of those moments when you've been looking for some records for a while, and there they are, just sitting next to each other, brilliant copies.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's proper record collector moment for me. But yeah, so that's it really. There's always something to find. Once you find one thing, there's always something else, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, and then just in terms of the question or the topic that we all talk about pricing on records and particularly secondhand stuff. How have you found it over the last sort of 5 years? Because is it going up, do you think, with the popularity of vinyl again?
Well, yeah, it's definitely going up. But I was thinking about this because, so with regards to new records, first of all, so I mean, what's the average price of a new record now? 25, 30 quid.
Yeah.
something like that, I suppose. I remember so in the early 90s paying, I don't know, 12 or 15 quid for a CD. I'm pretty sure that would equate to a similar amount now. Sort of 15 quid back then would be about 30 quid now, I suppose. So, it's not too dissimilar from that point of view. But yeah, used records, second-hand market is definitely increasing. I don't know what's driving that, whether it be Discogs or just the fact there's more people buying records, whether it's a fad thing, I don't know. But yeah, the price of records has definitely gone up in recent years.
Okay. Okay, then. So just to sort of end the conversation, then, like a little quick fire questions thing. It's probably going to be quite hard to answer some of these, but favorite soul or funk record?
Well, that is a tough one. It'd probably have to be Curtis Mayfield or Stevie, Songs in the Key of Life. I mean, I know that's a massive record that,
Yeah,
most people own, but that is a perfect record. Absolutely
it's
perfect
an
record.
absolute classic as well. Reggae, favorite reggae record?
Yeah, that would be. So I like the Rocksteady era. That's sort of 66 to 68, the more soulful side of reggae. So I'd probably have to go for something like Alton Ellis sings rock and soul. Definitely one of the most soulful reggae singers. Him and Ken Booth would probably be my favorite reggae vocalists.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'd probably go for Alton Ellis sings rock and soul.
Okay. The one record that you'd save from your burning house?
Right. So that yeah, I know what this would be actually. So I talking down to talk about record collecting and the amount waiting to find a record. I heard a song on the radio, probably in about 1999. It's a song by a band called the Dreamlets, who were a female reggae vocal harmony group, and they were Japanese. Okay, so they put out a handful of records in the mid 90s, just in Japan on a label called Moonbeat. They only pressed, I think, 500 copies of each of the records that they put out, and I heard their version of an old Supreme song called "A Breathtaking Guy" on the radio, and of course I heard it, fell in love with it, and I spent the next 12 years trying to find a copy. So literally every time I went to a record shop, or every time I turned on a computer, I'd look on eBay or whatever was available to me at that time, to try and find a copy of this record. I say it took me 12 years to find a copy. It's absolutely beautiful. The vocals, it's that beautiful. It's rock steady in style. It's that soulful side of reggae, but just gorgeous harmonies. And I say it took me years to find a copy. And I think if the house was on fire, that'd be what I'd be grabbing.
And where did you find it?
Well, I actually did get that online in the end.
Yeah.
I got it off from a Japanese website, Jetstar. I think I paid about 30 quid for it at the time. I think it goes for 10 times that now. It's obviously, people have got wind of it, but it's a beautiful song. I mean, if you don't know, check it out online. It's
Yeah.
it's gorgeous.
Okay. Favorite purchase this year? That can be secondhand or new.
Yeah, so some of the records I mentioned there, the Odyssey record, the Sweet Charles. I picked up original copy of the second Aaliyah album earlier in the year from Upside Down Records in Deptford, down in London,
Mhm.
and I think it's just been reissued actually. But I think that's a fantastic record, and so that's from what year 2000.
Mm.
So it's a bit more of a recent record, but yeah, she had a great voice. Another record that I picked up early in the year was Eddie Kendricks with People Hold On Motown.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, another killer record. So yeah, I've been quite lucky this year. I found a few things that I've been after for a little while, and they've turned up in record shops.
I'm hoping I might find that Eddie Kendricks one when I go to America in a couple of weeks' time because yeah, that's been on my
Yeah,
list for
I
a
mean
lot
it's
a long
it's not.
time.
Yeah, this is the thing. They obviously pressed a lot of copies of this, but it just doesn't turn up. And I suppose when it does, it doesn't hang around. That's exactly what the guy in the record shop said when I picked it up. I think he pretty much put it out, and I picked it up straight away. And he said anytime he gets a copy, and that's what happens.
Yeah.
Partially, I think it's because of the artwork. It's a fantastic image on the cover, but
Yeah.
it's a great album. It's a great album.
Okay. All right. And then to finish off, if you could pick a favorite record shop, what do you think it would be?
Yeah, so well, I say it's for me. It's down to the people, really. So I mentioned that the two local shops, Music is the Answer and Polar Bear. I get a lot of stuff from both, and I get on great with the owners. So that's from that point of view. But I think it pretty much comes down to what's in the shop at any one time. A particular moment. I remember last year I was actually on jury service in Birmingham city centre. And I came out one day and there's a record shop just over the road, Swordfish. And as I walked in, the
Hmm.
shop it had literally just been filled with about 3,000 soul and funk albums. The shop had just bought a collection. They hadn't gone through any of it. It had come in the day before, the night before, and it was just everywhere in the record shop. And I spent the next 3 days hoping that I wasn't going to be called for a case on jury service, so that I could go out and spend the rest of the day just going through records in Swordfish as it was, and it was just incredible. The second album that I put in, the first bin that I went through, the second album that I pulled out was James Mason, Rhythm of Life,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is one of the great rare groove albums. Original copy of that, and that's sort of how it went for the next 3 or 4 days when I was going through those 3,000 records. It was just incredible.
Wow. I've been to Sawfish when I was in Birmingham, like I say, and I bought a few bits from them. I can't remember what I bought. A couple of psych records, I think it was,
Yeah.
but yeah, brilliant. Thank you for coming on, John, and discussing your history of music and records, and obviously we talked about loads of stuff. So yeah, it's been brilliant to chat to you.
No, seriously, it's just good. I say this is the same thing as going to record shops, really. It's just good to talk to people about music. That's
Yeah,
what it comes down to, isn't it? So
that's
yeah,
it.
no, thank you for having me.
No problem at all. I will catch up with you soon.